Hey everyone, as we get started here, let me try to share it onto our page. We are starting our uh, Wednesday night services where we're going to study God's Word. So let me see, I think I can go ahead and share this. So I encourage you to do the same, share these studies on Facebook, and we'll get them on YouTube as soon as we can. So let me see. Once I share, we'll go ahead and get started. We got a few things to talk about. Um, Here we are. I'm going to hit share. All right. Well, as you can tell, things are a little different. I wanted to try something different, which I know change is something Baptists don't like. But I thought I'd come in my office and teach. I think the sound is a little better than it does in an empty sanctuary. So hopefully this will be better for everybody, including myself. Don't have to worry about headphones, which only help marginally instead. So, all right. With that said, let's go over some prayer requests here this evening. Um, I'm uncomfortable with sharing in a public space like this specific names, but we've got several people who are sick, who have needs, and God knows who they are. So we want to make sure we lift those up, as well as our government officials who are making difficult decisions as we plan on reopening our economy and our communities. And we'll have some things to say about that today and moving forward as well. And of course, our medical officials and staff that God will protect them, use them, and victims of this disease, other diseases. A lot of people waiting on what have been said to be elective surgeries, but would do wonders on their own health and well being. So there's a lot of people suffering right now. The main thing we want is to see God do something amazing out of the coronavirus pandemic. Let it be that souls are saved and that hearts are softened because of this um, experience. With that said, I want to go over some announcements. Uh, we still have the same announcements that we want to emphasize during this time. We encourage you to call around members of our church and encourage them. Call your neighbors, your friends, family, co-workers, strangers, whatever. The main thing is to express Christian love to those in need, and let your light shine among men and women and children at this time. How vitally important is that ministry? We're still doing our daily devotions and using technology as much as we can. We are working on getting DVDs to those who may not have access to the internet or Facebook, YouTube, or anything like that. So we're doing everything we can on this side to share the good news of Jesus, to encourage people through these trying times, because we're really looking at several more weeks before we really start to see a change in our lifestyles. With that said, what East Frankfort Baptist Church is doing in preparation for the various phases of reopening. Uh, we're not going to be able to go from one day to another where we're living in lockdown to we're not living in lockdown. Rather, we're going to phase out of lockdown. And in many ways, that's how we got into lockdown, right? We didn't shut everything down on day one. Rather, it was about a 2 week process we began to shut things down. The day that the NCAA and other stuff canceled, that was sort of the when the ball really got to roll. But it was probably another week before a number of other things were shut down. So I still remember one day I could go into a restaurant and get something to go, but it had to be to go. And the next day, you couldn't even go in to get a to go order. Everything had to be drive through. So, opening up restaurants, businesses, and churches is going to take several phases. What we are going to do here at East Frankfort Baptist Church, and this is in collaboration with staff, leaders, and others, what we're doing is we are beginning that phasing process this Sunday. So the schedule we have set up this Sunday will be our schedule until we officially go back to our old schedule. What that schedule is a early service at 8:30 in the morning. That'll go to about 9:30. Sunday school at 9:45 until 10:45, and then another worship service from 11 a.m. to noon. Okay, so let me just say that again. You should have got an email on this, and we'll post more about this tomorrow, um, and everything. So an early service at 8:30 in the morning. That will be aired live on Facebook. Sunday school at 9:45, and then another worship service at 11. I want to share with you why we're doing this. So this Sunday morning, you can catch our live worship service in the sanctuary at 8:30 in the morning. All right, and then we'll transition about 15 minutes later into Sunday school. And then at 11, we're going to have a drive-in service. So you can come and check that out there. The reason we're doing this is because this is part of our plan to phase in worship. Eventually, not yet, but eventually, we'll be able to have people come and worship with us in person. That's what we want, to worship again together in person and not just online. In order to meet those requirements, we are having two services to make sure we can still practice social distancing and yet still encourage people to come worship with us. So once we get to that stage, and I know some of the comments the governor has made, more will be said tomorrow. So I don't want to address those yet. So right now we'll have an early service on Facebook, a later service in drive-in, and eventually we'll phase out the drive-in and just have a regular 11 o'clock service. So we'll have the 8:30 and 11. So this is part of our plan. It's probably going to be about a month or two plan, depending on how long these phases take, probably closer to 2 or 3 months. But we're trying to make decisions now that way we don't have to keep changing schedules and keep adjusting. No, the schedule we have starting this Sunday will be our schedule for the weeks to come, even months to come, until we're officially out of lockdown. Okay, so this Sunday, you can join us live on Facebook at 8:30 in the morning, or you can join us live through our drive-in service at 11 a.m. In between there, we'll have Sunday school at 9:45. Again, we'll send all this information out tomorrow. You should have gotten an email today regarding that. So we are doing what we can in light of this coronavirus, like everyone else is. And these are uncharted waters for all of us. And so we're trusting this is a wise track forward. And I think in collaboration with our leaders, Sunday school teachers, staff, and stuff, this is a plan that we can get on board with. With that said, let's go to the Lord in prayer, and then we'll be looking at Genesis chapter 3. Let's pray. Our Father, thank you for your love and your mercy. Lord, we lift up to you all of these needs that we have, and we trust that you would take care of each and every one of them. May your grace prove sufficient, and may your love shine down on all of us. May you soften hearts of those who have rejected the gospel. May you use us as believers to be a light in this world that so desperately needs the comfort and grace and love of Jesus. And would you help us as we open up your word? May we understand it rightly, and may we apply it to our lives. In the name of your Son we pray. Amen. All right, so we're in Genesis chapter 3, and we are slowly working our way through it. So Genesis 3, Lord willing, next week we will be done with this chapter. So we are going faster than we have been in at least compared to chapter 1, but it still isn't rapid fire pace. Genesis chapter 3, we want to read verses 14 to 19. Moses writes on the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, "The Lord God said to the serpent, because you have done this, cursed are you above all livestock, and above all beasts of the field. On your belly you shall go, and dust you shall eat all the days of your life. I will put enmity," or hostility, your translation may say, "between you and the woman, between your offspring and her offspring. He shall bruise your head, you shall bruise his heel. To the woman he said, I will surely multiply your pain in childbearing. In pain you shall bring forth children. Your desire shall be contrary to your husband, but he shall rule over you." And to Adam he said, because you have listened to the voice of your wife, and have eaten of the tree of which I commanded you, you shall not eat of it. Cursed is the ground because of you. In pain you shall eat of it all the days of your life. Thorns and thistles it shall bring forth for you. You shall eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your face you shall eat bread till you return to the ground, for out of it you were taken, for you are dust, and to dust you shall return. Well, if you've been tracking with us over the last, what is this, the fourth week or something, and if you have, bless your heart. But we've seen chapter 3. The pattern has been, or we've looked at the creature there in the very first verse, the serpent, who plays a major part in this chapter. We've then seen the choice that the man and a woman have to make when the serpent tempts them. And then last week we saw the confrontation um, when they encountered God. Remember, God is showing up not because he's confused. Where did Adam and Eve go? He comes already knowing what has happened. He comes in judgment. And that makes what we're looking at today, the condemnation, makes sense. Here, God is coming down in judgment. He lays down judgment. Now, that is an image that we don't really like of God, is it? We want a God who is cuddly, not a God who condemns. But you can't have one without the other in the Bible. A good father is one who can be stern and who can also be gracious. Right? A father understands this. There's a time when you have to correct, and there is time that you have to hold. And God is that sort of father. Here he has his children who have directly rebelled against his will. In this act of disobedience, God doesn't just come and just say, well, no big deal, we gave it an old college try. No, God comes in judgment. Now, next week we'll look at the grace that God extends in this latter third of this chapter. But before we can see the grace, we have to appreciate and understand the judgment by which God comes here. God curses everything. And because of their sin, everything is cursed. Christian theology refers to this as the fall, and it explains so much about our world. Like the very fact that I'm talking in my office to a camera because everyone is on lockdown at home. Right? This passage explains so much for us. So the condemnation is in three parts. First to the serpent, then to the woman, and finally to the man. And we'll look at these individually. First of all, God condemns or curses the serpent. You may be familiar with the story, so I don't want to go in a lot of details, but my dad once picked up a shovel when I was a teenager, and underneath it was a snake under the shade of the shovel. And so now he realized he was exposed, and my dad is petrified of snakes. I mean, he loathes snakes to his very being, right? Every a cell in his body, every strain of DNA hates snakes. He is convinced that every snake that has ever walked God's green earth is personally possessed by Satan himself. I mean, Dad hates snakes. And on this particular occasion, I saw the snake, and I told Dad that if you'll patiently wait, there was a car between us. I was going to go around the cars in the garage, and I'll pick up the snake and throw it over the fence. That's what we did growing up. From here to there was a world of difference because it was over the fence. I don't know. So I was going to throw it over the fence, and Dad wasn't going to have any of that. The second that snake began to move, because I think the snake could feel Dad trembling right on the ground. He could feel it through the ground, and Dad just used the shovel and chopped this snake's head off, right? And he didn't say anything to me. He just went to war against this satanic, demonic creature. And he shovels up, put over a fence, and all he said to me was, the only good snake is a dead snake. Right? And I will always remember that. And Dad has said it since. But he truly believes that. The only good snake is a dead snake. You can't talk to him and put any sense in his mind about the role snakes play in dealing with mice and other creatures. No, Dad thinks they should all just be dead. Well, many think that it is from this passage where the snake lost its legs. I'm not so convinced that is what God is trying to tell us here. What we don't have here is a new creation. So the serpent is different. The woman is different. The man is different. What we actually have is an unraveling of creation. Remember the creation story in Genesis 1-2 is that God brings order out of that chaos. And so God's spirit hovers over the deep of the waters, right? And out of that he creates light. Out of that he parts the waters, right? So God brings order out of chaos. Well, what we have now is chaos. So we have this unraveling of God's creation. Now we'll see it next week when we speak of grace that just smothers this passage and in the end of the chapter. God is going to bring order out of this chaos, but we have to deal with the chaos here. So I don't think it's so much about God explaining to us why snakes crawl on their bellies. Rather, we see the significance of why they crawl on their bellies. So what we have here, in his condemnation of the serpent, we see both judgment and prophecy. Penalty and prophecy are right here. I think that's different than what we see with Adam and Eve. He doesn't speak prophetically with the man and the woman, but he does speak prophetically with the serpent, which we'll come back to next week. So the phrase belly and dust, on your belly you shall go, you shall eat the dust of the earth, right? Whenever we see those two ideas put together, it is always in the context of humiliation and defeat. Let me give you a few examples. Psalm 72:9. May desert tribes bow down before him, and his enemies lick the dust. So what is it? What is it to bow down? It is to prostrate yourself as low as you can get. That is an act of humiliation, and it is an act of defeat. Right? So if you lose a battle, if you have to surrender the war, in ancient times you would come and prostrate yourself before the victor for the sake of your own life. It's a sign of defeat, as a sign of humiliation. Likewise, in Isaiah 65:25, the wolf and the lamb shall graze together, the lion shall eat straw like the ox, and dust shall be the serpent's foot. They shall not hurt or destroy in all my holy mountain, says the Lord. Micah 7:17, they shall lick the dust like a serpent. Like the crawling things of the earth, they shall come trembling out of the strongholds. They shall turn in dread to the Lord our God. They shall be in fear of you. Again, notice this is the language of judgments. So what I think is being described here in the curse of the serpent is judgment, but it is a prophetic judgment. You shall crawl on your belly. You shall come in humiliation. The lower you are, the more humble you are. I don't know if you've ever seen the more recent biographical movie simply titled Luther. It's about Martin Luther. And it's really good. I quite enjoy it. The one from the 1950s is good, but this one is quite good. It's less theologically deep and explores his inner struggle quite well. But before Luther leaves the Catholic Church, he wants to be a good monk, but he's under some trouble because of some of the stuff he's written and said. And there's a scene where Luther is literally lying on his face, his arms stretched out before the person in the Catholic Church that is above him. It's an archbishop, or I think it's a cardinal. And what that is that prostration was Luther repenting, confessing. That was an act of humiliation. He was, we could say, crawling on his belly, right? If you're begging someone not to do something, you'll get as low as you can, right? And that's the idea here, is that God will bring humiliation upon the serpent, but not just humiliation, but defeat. I mean, this is the point of dust, right? What is the diet of the dead? What does the dead eat? Obviously, they don't eat literally. But in a real sense, their diet is dust. I think we understand the imagery there. That you will crawl on your belly and you shall eat dust all the days of your life. And throughout ancient Near Eastern history, dust, or the consuming of dust, was a picture for death, or we could say in this context, defeat. In fact, we get a hint of this, and this is going to come into play fairly soon whenever we look at the judgment of man. Genesis 2:7, then the Lord God formed the man of dust from the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living creature. And out of that, he then gives him the garden, right? So we see that in Genesis 2, man comes out from the dust to eat of fruit. The serpent is going to go down into the dust, which he will then consume. So chapter 2 is the first use of dust. This is the second use of it, and it is the opposite application. Man comes out of it because he is God's creation, that is grace, but the serpent is then sent down into it. This is defeat. This is death itself. So in judgment, the serpent and all that he represents is cursed. So prophetically, the serpent and all that he represents is cursed. So it isn't just that God is going to condemn the serpent, Satan, but rather it is the works of sin, the works of death, the works of the serpent, Satan, will be destroyed. And we don't see this ultimately until the final day of judgment, where death and hell are thrown into the lake of fire, right? That's the ultimate climax of it. But remember, this is prophetic. The day will come when the serpent's forked tongue will not deceive anyone, right? There is a prophecy here. In fact, this is made very clear in verse 15. I will put enmity between you, that is the serpent, and the woman. Okay? So we see that these two will be at war with each other. But the way it's demonstrated is then said between your offspring, her offspring. Now, we know that the serpent here doesn't reproduce, right? So what we're not going to find is the next generation of humans are going to be fighting snakes, right? Or slaying dragons or anything like that. That's not the point. This is all, it's prophetic language here. It's speaking spiritually, not physically. In fact, we'll get this in chapter 4. The Cain and Abel illustrate this scene perfectly. And we'll see, I've got the hiccups. So we see that Cain embodies the serpent's seed. It's as if he is an offspring of the serpent. In fact, remember, it describes sin crouching at the door. That is an animalistic term to describe what's happening to Abel. It's not an accident that he is described like an animal when he carries the serpent's seed. Not literally, that's when we just really get off the rails, but spiritually, metaphorically. And we know this because he will not rule over sin, which was going to come out when we look at the judgment to the woman, right? It's the same term used in both scenes, right? Seth, on the other hand, or really Abel before that, is the righteous seed, the seed of the woman, right? And we'll have more to say about this next week. So we see that the seed of the woman will bruise the head of the serpent, or crush the head, strike the head. There's different ways to translate it. Essentially, the same term is used then, and you shall bruise his heel. Now, the issue is which one is a fatal blow and which one is a wound, right? So the serpent will get a fatal blow from the seed of the woman. And remember, the prophecy is, you will return to dust. You will eat dust. You will be humiliated, and you will crawl on your belly and eat dust. So that is the condemnation of the serpent. Now, we move then to the curse of the man and the woman. In order to understand that, let's do some introductory stuff here. In understanding God's judgment of the man and the woman. Have you ever noticed the difference between stories designed and targeted towards men and stories designed and targeted for women? Now, we're speaking in general terms. I think I've shared the story before that mine and my wife's first date, where she met, where she came to my parents' house, right? It was supposed to be a guy's night out, and it's just me and Dad. Okay, and he was going to grill steaks. We were going to watch Gladiator, right? And every guy that's ever existed since the making of Gladiator loves Gladiator. It's Gladiator and Braveheart, right? We all love it, okay? And so I remember I invited my girlfriend over. We've been dating maybe a month, if that. And Dad was cool with it, but he wasn't going to change our meal or our movie, right? That was his guy's night out. Your mother's not here. We're going to eat man food, watch man movies. So I was convinced that my girlfriend, my now wife, will love Dad's steak. It is just love it when Dad grills his steak. Big, thick ribeyes, juicy, medium rare. Oh, it makes you want to go to war. But I thought she'd hate the movie. Why? Because Gladiator wasn't written for women. And it doesn't mean women can't like it. It's clearly geared towards a primarily male audience. Well, we found out later, or Amanda finally told me later, that she despised my dad's steaks. We grew up as the sort of carnivores that like medium rare steaks, right? You should be able to taste the juice of that cow, right? You should really know that this thing once lived. She likes them paper thin and burnt to a crisp. In fact, I know that if I'm cooking meat at the house, um, her meat is done whenever the smoke alarm is about to go off, right? That's the standard she has set. And I'm not lying about that. I'm being tongue in cheek, but I'm not lying. That is true. Because the smoke alarm has gone off quite a bit. And first thing I always say is, honey, your meat is done. Pork chops are done, huh? But she loved the movie, right? And she loves Gladiator and other stuff like that. So we're speaking in general terms here. But I think it's obvious that there is a difference between quote unquote guy movies and movies geared towards women. And what's the difference? You could do this with books and shows and stuff. In stories geared towards men, the mission is the plot, right? You got to save the girl. You got to get the gold. You got to defeat the enemy. You got to stop the bad guy. You got to save the city, right? Those sort of things. The mission is the plot. But in stories that are targeted towards women, it is usually, not always, of course, the relationship is the plot. You got to have that first meetup. You got to win each other's heart and woo each other, and then the relationship builds, and there's the ups and downs, and then the winning of each other over, and then of course it's love everlasting, all of that sort of stuff. Or think about the difference between magazines targeting men as a general rule and magazines targeting women as a general rule. Again, it doesn't describe every magazine. We're just speaking in general terms. What you'll find is that for men, it's all about really what is around and outside of the relationship. It's about certain hobbies and fixing things and going here and winning at this and investing there and all of that sort of stuff. For women, again, it's more geared towards the relationship or the home, like how to win the guy and how to do this and that, right? It's much more towards the relationship and personal betterment and stuff like that. Well, once we grasp that, I think we can understand really what is happening here in the condemnation of both the man and the woman. We see here, it's not that men and women are cursed, but that everything around them are cursed. Now, I say they're not cursed specifically. It's that they are under judgment, yes, and that we see the unraveling of humanity, yes. But in terms of specific cursing, I'm not sure that's exactly what the text said. Her curse is primarily family and relationship oriented. It is primarily about the home. His curse, on the other hand, is work and mission oriented. It is primarily regarding the world. Okay? So once you grasp that, I think we can better understand what is happening here. And we should know that the Bible presumes, because it's obvious, men and women are different. You cannot switch the condemnation of men and women here, thinking that the meaning changes. It does. It wouldn't make any sense, right? But rather, men and women are different. And if you don't believe that, then why are you anti-science, right? I just, what a weird world that we live in. With that said, let's look at the condemnation of the woman, because this will keep me out of trouble, okay? So notice it's broken down into two parts. There is the emphasis on pain and the emphasis on desire, right? First, the pain, starting in verse 16. To the woman he said, I will surely multiply your pain in childbearing. In pain you shall bring forth children. Your desire shall be contrary to your husband. He shall rule over you. So notice the pain emphasis first. I still remember whenever our son was born, our very firstborn, and I had planned this. Um, the labor was about 8 hours. We had some complications, nothing serious, but some things that we wanted to figure out and whatnot. And finally, he gets here, right? And we were just so excited. Everybody's excited, and we had him in Louisville, and the hospital we had it at believed in the skin to skin, immediate touch, like the mother and the baby, all that sort of stuff. And then my wife just, she was sold after that, right? And I remember with after 8 hours of labor, 9, 10 months of pregnancy, and then all the stuff that goes through it. Here's this, she's holding him, right? And that is a joy that I'm not sure is something you can duplicate, right? That is a unique joy that every mother has, right? And I remember I asked her, I said, would you do it again? I was just curious to see what her answer was. And it was amazing to see how she had immediately forgotten the birth pangs. She had immediately forgotten him kicking her in the ribs for months on end. And we were worried about her ribs breaking. She immediately forgot the morning sickness. She immediately forgot the worries and the planning and will we make ends meet and what are we going to do about a job and all this sort of stuff. All of that stuff had just disappeared. So we moved from pain to joy in an instant. The second she saw that baby and held him in her arms. Same thing with our second child, right? Well, that is the beauty and the mystery of childbirth is the suffering that comes with it and the unmatched joy it provides. It's the beauty and the mystery of it, isn't it? Well, the thing she wants most here, a loving husband and a family and a home, will come to her through great suffering. And the role she plays within the home will require some suffering. Right? So I think what's happening here isn't just, hey, ladies, guess what's going to hurt when you give birth? That's part of it. But it's deeper than that. I think I can prove it. The specific word here for pain is used in three different verses in the Old Testament. And it's only in Genesis 3 and in Genesis 5. You'll find it used twice in Genesis 3. You see the emphasis with the pain of the man and work and stuff. And in Genesis 5, different contexts and so forth. So what do we do here? Well, it can mean physical pain, but the root word, which is used a lot over the Old Testament, like 50, 60, 70 times, that root word doesn't mean usually physical pain. It can, but it doesn't mean physical pain. It speaks of emotional pain, psychological pain, spiritual pain. And so whenever the root word that is used here is used in the Old Testament, it is often, almost always translated as grieved or displeased or even like vexed. And it speaks of a spiritual, emotional, psychological pain here. So what will be the experience of the woman in this context? Well, a couple things here. First of all, anxiety regarding childbirth. Again, I don't think the issue is just physical pain of childbearing. I think it's more of what lies in, under, and around that. I think it's both and. Every new mother is, of course, nervous prior to giving birth. I still remember my wife and I, we took birthing classes. And the far majority of the couples in that birthing class, we met like every week for 5 weeks, something like that, were first-time parents. Why? Because there is that anxiety. And one of the things that it was through the hospital, what they did was they showed you every instrument they use in every birth, right? If you got to have an IV, here it is. You can touch, you can see this is what the medicine is. This is that, this is this. They showed videos, which I'll never get out of my head. They had guest speakers. They brought in other mothers. They encouraged you this, and they talked about that. They showed you how to put a child in a car seat. All of that sort of stuff. Why? Because there is an anxiety that comes with parenthood, right? And you don't get that until you find out that you're pregnant. I mean, it is instant. Every man here, and you discover your wife is pregnant, you're immediately thinking, oh no, can I provide for this child? The anxiety is immediately there, right? So there's the anxiety part. Every birth, even after that first one, brings with it anxieties, doesn't it? I still remember when when I think my wife was 6 weeks along with our second, she had to have an ultrasound because the doctor was convinced she was having twins. We had like 2 minutes to process that information. They said, okay, you may be having twins. We're going to take you to have an ultrasound. Wait right here and go get the person who operates it. We had like 2 minutes, 5 minutes of waiting, and I remember thinking, what are we going to do with twins? Right? I mean, I think I was still in school. I know I was still in school, and all this stuff happening. And I remember saying, okay, honey, this is our game plan, right? You'll name one and I'll name the other, and we'll try not to fight with the other about it, which is a terrible idea. But we were just grasped with this anxiety. But then there's anxieties over labor, the pregnancy, the child's health, right? I still remember our second, we were in a bit of a fender bender, nothing serious. And we went to the doctor like the next day. Is the baby okay? Right? There is an anxiety regarding childbirth, but we also have here, because I think it's bigger than childbirth, we have anxiety over motherhood described here. And this is the part we rarely discuss. The stress of parenthood, the burden upon the mother, and the persistent fear of not measuring up, I think is implied here. I think it's very implied. How many of you husbands have to constantly remind your beloved wife that, honey, you are enough for me. You are enough for these children. You are a fantastic mother. But is the stress, and social media has made this worse, right? Because you see your neighbor with their kids and their life is perfect. You see that coworker, that other member of the church, and their life seems perfect. Their kids are perfect and they're obedient and they are making it financially and all this sort of stuff. And you think, somehow now I don't measure up. That is the pain. That is the anxiety. That is the grieving. That is the vexing, if you will, of this role within the home as a mother and as a wife. I think all of that is implied here. The thing we want the most is often the thing we fear we may never have, at least not the way we imagined it. Isn't this why so many ministers don't like to do weddings? I got a wedding this Saturday. Obviously, not many people are going to be there, right? There is the stress upon every bride because she has it in her head what it ought to be, and it has to be this. Otherwise, all of her dreams are ruined. And one of the things I've learned as a pastor and counseling young couples through this process is to say that you need to plan for your marriage more than your wedding. You'll make far more memories marrying than you will in planning your wedding, right? Everything could go wrong with your wedding. See to it that it doesn't seep into your marriage, right? Focus on your marriage. And then I found that dream state that a lot of brides get into their wedding, they've been planning since they were a little girl. It's the details they lack. And it's amazing. I can come along and say, do you know the order things go in? And have you ever thought about this? And it's amazing, the relief that is on many, many young brides. I think that is implied here, right? The pain of childbearing, the things you desire the most and find the most joy in will come through great suffering. So again, I don't think it's just physical pain, but mental, emotional, and spiritual strain of womanhood. And then there's that word desire, and this is the part I'll get in most trouble in. And I haven't decided if I'm going to say everything that I think is here. This is the controversial passage. This word translated desire is used only 3 times in the Old Testament, translated desire every time. One is in Song of Solomon, chapter 7. I am my beloved's, his desire is for me, right? So chapter 7 of Song of Solomon is the most erotic of Song of Solomon, okay? So I think the context there, it's kind of obvious how desire is being described there. But when you come into the second usage of this, it's very different. In fact, it gives us the most insight into what is being meant in this judgment. Why? Because in Genesis chapter 4, verse 7, if you want to turn there, I would encourage you to do that. Genesis 4, 7, both the word desire and the word rule is used. Again, look at Genesis 3:16. It says, your desire shall be contrary to your husband. It's hard to translate some of this. Your desire will be for your husband. Your desire will be contrary to your husband. Different translations say different things. He will rule over you, okay? So that word desire and rule, that word desire is used only one other time outside of Song of Solomon. It's in Genesis 4, and with it comes this word rule, okay? So that's why Genesis 4:7 is so important. The context is Cain and Abel. Same 2 words are used in the context of Cain as is used here. It says, God tells Cain, if you do well, will you not be accepted? And if you do not do well, sin is crouching at the door. We've talked about that. Its desire, same word used here in Genesis 3, is contrary to you, but you must rule over it. So we see this contrast between desire on the one hand, ruling over the other. When the words desire and rule are used, it speaks of control and domination. So one classic interpretation of this is to say, what you have is essentially the battle of the sexes. On the one hand, the woman will begin to want to, her desire will be one of control over her husband. On the other hand, he responds by ruling over her. Think about all the silly fights you have with your spouse. Could you not describe it as that? When we were first married, we both do laundry and stuff, and and some of the dishes. I do a lot of cooking. I enjoy cooking, especially since my wife got sick, and I cooked tacos before I came here, so I enjoy cooking. I've really grown to like it. Not that good at it, but I do enjoy it. But I remember Man and I had this big fight. I mean, not fight. This discussion over how to fold towels. She folds the towel like long ways. You fold it. I do it. So she's landscape. I'm portrait, right? So you have it long, then you fold it in half, then you right. And the reason is because of it's easier to get it out whenever you dry off and stuff. I know it's goofy. Of course it is. That's the way I was raised. That's how you fold a towel. Well, apparently my wife thought, I'll give him this one so I don't have to budge on that one. That's my theory, right? I think she would give up the towels so long as she wouldn't give up on the decorative pillows. It's got to be that, right? I don't know. But a lot of our fights is over this, right? Who should have the control? I want to read to you. This is part where I'm going to get in trouble. Doug Wilson, don't agree with everything with Douglas Wilson, but I do find this helpful. He's really condemning feminism, and he's showing how feminism is a war against nature. He says, in short, feminists are women. And this means they do not get to opt out of the curse that God placed in the relationship between the sexes. I find that fascinating. Feminism is anti-feminine, right? Because it tells women that in order for you to be fulfilled, you have to be like men. The Bible comes and says, in order for you to be a fulfilled woman, you should be a woman. Who'd have thunk it, right? So I don't think feminism is pro-woman. And he says, but look, even feminists, though they may try to war against nature, can't defeat the curse, right? He goes on. After the fall, God told Eve that her desire would be for her husband. So then he quotes Genesis 3:16. The only other time this particular phrase is used in the Bible is in the very next chapter in the warning God gives to Cain, and the similarity in usage is quite striking. If you do well, which we've read, will you not be accepted? If you do not do well, sin is crouching at the door. Its desires for you, but you must rule over it. The desire in both cases is a desire for mastery, and the rule in both cases is defensive retaliation. At the same time, the woman is conflicted about her husband. The woman is conflicted about her desire for mastery and hopes on another level that she will not get her way. This is because prior to the fall, God had created her to be a help. I want to stop there with Doug. There's more I could say. So here's the thing, is this battle of the sexes. What I remember that Eve was designed, woman was designed to be a help, but now there is this desire that speaks of control, domination. On the other hand, instead of being a partner, he becomes ruler. Instead of being leader, he becomes ruler. So what do we do with this? Well, one, we see not only is there brokenness in the home in general, there's brokenness in our relationships. Right? I think this is what we're getting at, right? We're just short on time here. What you'll see is in a lot of relationships, when men are not leading, not all, but a lot, if not most, when the man refuses to lead, and there's a vacuum there, that is one of the offshoots of this curse. it turns into control, but there's resentment, and now she has to control because he will not lead. Right? It's not a healthy thing to do. She was designed to be a helpmate, not to lead in that way. Well, let us quickly look at the curse upon the man, verse 17 and 19. We see two things. First of all, a cursed world, and then a cursed life. The word pain is used in verse 17 because you've listened to the voice of your wife rather than leading her, right? And have eaten of the tree of which I commanded you, you shall not eat of it. Cursed is the ground because of you. In pain you shall eat it all the days of your life. Same word used up there. So I don't think, again, it's just physical pain. Yes, it's going to get hot outside, and you're going to sweat, and your joints are going to hurt, and you're going to be sore when you wake up the next morning. All of that is true. All of it, right? But it isn't just that. It's the anxiety of it. Right? Will this job pay my bills? Will this yield a great crop? Have we invested our finances wisely? Is this the sort of home we need for our family? Is it big enough for the children that we have? All of that sort of stuff comes with the cursed world. In fact, you'll notice in verse 18 that phrase, thorns and thistles. Thorns and thistles they shall bring forth for you, should eat the plants of the field. That phrase, thorns and thistles, is used elsewhere to describe judgment. Look at Hosea 10:8 if you're interested in checking that. Thorns and thistles is a way of God showing judgment, right? So whenever you're pulling those weeds and you and whatnot, just remember this is all because of the judgment of God. All because of the judgment of God upon the earth. It is cursed. And as we saw, as we will see, because we're going to be looking at Romans 8 this Sunday morning to talk about our security in the gospel, that creation itself is groaning for its redemption. As we groan for our redemption, so the creation itself is groaning. So we see the cursed world, and then we see the cursed life. I just want to emphasize this part, verse 19. The sweat of your face you shall eat bread till you return to the ground, for out of it you were taken, for you are dust, and the dust you shall return. There's that emphasis on dust again. So you see the bookends of these condemnations. The serpent, right? His diet would be dust. The man, he shall return to dust. Remember, in creation, man came out of the dust, right, in order to rule the world and have dominion over it. But now, he will not only come from the dust, he will return back to it. And remember, the promise was, the day in which you eat of the fruit you shall die. This is the promise that this act of disobedience will result in death. And here it is again in the context of death, right? Dust is in the context of death. This is used throughout the Bible. Psalm 103:14. For he knows our frame, he remembers that we are dust. Ecclesiastes 3:20, all go to one place, all are from dust, and to dust all return. Clearly, Solomon has been reading his Bible there. So the judgment upon the man is the cursed world and the cursed life. So what do we do with all this? I want to end with this. Here's a summary of it. Remember that this is our understanding of the doctrine of the fall and the doctrine of original sin. That is that you and I have inherited a fallen nature from our parents going all the way back to the first couple. And if you want more biblical evidence of this, Romans 5 is the place to start. You can also turn to 1 Corinthians 15. But this is very clear. Also why Jesus had to be born of a virgin. Anyways, so what a summary regarding this. First of all, the fallen world is one of war and hostility. We can get that certainly from the cursing of the serpent, right? There will be enmity, hostility, war, and violence, and anger, and wrath, and malice, and jealousy between your seed and her seed. We live in a violent world, torn asunder by division, fighting, tribalism, everything. And we never get rid of it. Unfortunately, while we're all trying to unite under a common vision to fight coronavirus, man, we still go to our little petty tribes, don't we? I'm a Democrat. I'm a Republican. I'm this, I'm that. I'm this, I'm that. And we want to wage war and throw stones at each other all the time. This world will always be full of division, tribalism, anger, and resentments. It is an unfortunate reality of the fall. this hostility between the two seeds. Secondly, sin lies at the core of all brokenness and evil. Isn't this the curse of we see of the woman? Specifically given to the woman, but isn't just limited to her. Sin lies at the core of all brokenness and evil. Again, it's the seed of the woman, the seed of the serpent. And that talk of brokenness, that anxiety, so brokenness isn't because God has forsaken you or that you or any of that sort of stuff. It all stems from sin. Maybe you have been sinned against. Maybe you're feeling the guilt and shame of sin, but at its core is sin. Broken systems, broken societies, broken people. At its core is not, at this core is sin. You can't fix it with political reforms or political revolutions or psychology or self-help. You must deal with the sin problem. Thirdly, sin lies at the core of our broken world. So it isn't just that we're broken, but the world itself is broken. We err when we try to say what's wrong with the world is systemic. You deal with the system and everyone else will be happy. We also make error when it says it's just that we're broken. No, we're all broken. Everything in this world is broken, right? Now the system's broken because people are broken. But then again, there is no perfect system, right? And so, yes, the system is can be evil and wrong, but is also made up of evil people running the system. Right? And then that's what we see the curse against the man. By the way, this explains why it is I'm talking in my office to a camera alone at this church. Because of coronavirus. Sin explains pandemics and disease and all of that. Now, what I'm not saying is because we've sinned, therefore we have coronavirus, right? As if God is punishing us with the coronavirus. I don't know about that. What I am saying is that living in a fallen world, which came as a result of disobedience, we therefore have pandemics, epidemics, and all that sort of stuff. Fourth and finally, then we'll be done. Death is both unnatural and the result of judgments. The issue of death has been something we've all been seeing on the news every day, isn't it? Here's a number of people who have died. What is it? I'm not sure it's a helpful statistic, but more people have died now of coronavirus in Vietnam. Now, one thing is not like the other, so I don't know how or why we're using that statistics, but it's still a number, I guess, that we can look at. So we are inundated with death right now. The reason there is death is because there is sin. What is it that Paul says in Romans 6:23? The wages of sin, the paycheck for sin, is death. It's death. Therefore, death is unnatural. Remember that the tree of life was to sustain life so that man and woman could walk with God forever. But now all of that has been taken away. Now, man and God the relationship is severed. So, what we have here then is that death is unnatural. There is why Paul describes the sting of death. We look in that cast and we know that this is not the way things should be. This is not the way things once were. And our hope, as we'll see next week, is that the day will come when the serpent is crushed. He is no more. And all of this is in the past. And we will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. And there will be the tree of life. No more fear of sin, temptation, guilt, shame, war, hostility, violence, enmity, envy, covetousness, pride. None of that is no more. What we will have is that tree that gives life and the Creator who gave us that life. May we long for that day. Be sure to join us next Wednesday. I want to show you the gospel in Genesis chapter 3. I think you're going to love it. We've talked about it a little bit before, but I want us to put it all together. So be sure to join same time next Wednesday, 6:30 live on Facebook. Or if you're watching this on YouTube, we'll put it up there afterwards. So with that said, I'm going to remind you, this Sunday morning, we'll go live on Facebook at 8:30 in the morning. And then Sunday school at 9:45, drive-in worship at 11 a.m. With that, thank you guys for joining us. I hope you're enjoying our study of God's Word. And Lord willing, we'll see you tomorrow. We look at Matthew 16 live. And then we'll see you Friday and also Sunday for worship. See you.